All right, so as we mentioned, today I'm going to be talking about Sando, which is a local code search tool as well as an extensible framework for research. But I want to take just a second to point out something about the co-authors, because I think this particular project is a really good example of how academics and industrial types can work together to extend both the state of the art and the state of the practice. So, of course, as you mentioned, I'm from ABB Corporate Research, right here in Raleigh on the NC State campus. One of my collaborators is here, Kostadin Demesky, and he's from Virginia State University. We also work with Bartosz Robski, who is an open source contributor, not in research and industry. He just does this on his free time, but he's contributed quite a bit. And we also work with Thomas Fritz from the University of Zurich. So first of all, why are we so interested in code search that we would have spent almost a year of programming so far, each of us, on this project? Well, it turns out when you look back at the empirical studies, or when you watch developers program yourself, they are executing a lot of searches. In particular, if you look at Coe et al.'s 2006 study, they had a trivial program, 500 lines of code, big program, yet in 40 of the 48 instances of people beginning maintenance tasks, they started with a search. So even though it was a very small program, they're still using search. In a similar empirical study, Sando et al., also in 2006, they were studying programmers doing maintenance tasks, but their point of view is they were trying to figure out what types of questions are developers asking. And in this context, they found 4 categories, and out of these categories, one of the 4 was finding initial focus points. This is one of the major categories of questions developers were asking, and one of the most prevalent ways they solved it was, again, through code search. So finally, we didn't just take these other studies' word for it. We also did perform our own empirical studies, and where we had developers performing maintenance tasks. And again, in 9 out of the 12 developers executing these studies, in the first 12 steps, the first 12 clicks that they did in their task, they executed at least one search and several of them more. So we see a lot of evidence that search support would be helpful for developers. But this is all kind of abstract. What I want to do now is look at a specific example of somebody searching. So you see this developer, he opens up the search tool in Eclipse, and he's going to look for a very specific string. It's save failed, I believe. And he's actually put it in quotes. So even more specific, it has to be an exact match on that string, save failed. And of course, as you might imagine, if you've ever used these search tools in Eclipse or Visual Studio, this search fails. He does not find a match to that search string. So he's going to reformulate his query, and we'll see in just a minute, he's going to kind of back off his query. He's going to do a much more general query. Instead of save failed, he's going to just search for the word failed. So he's broadening his query, and you'll see when he executes this query, just as you might imagine, there are a lot more results. In fact, there are 134 matches in this not too big workspace. The problem with these results is that they're not even ranked, so he's probably going to have to go through quite a few of these results before he finds exactly the piece of code that he's looking for. All of this to bring up this point that, similar to the Jamie Zawinski quote, some people, when confronted with a problem, think, I know, I'll use regular expressions. Now they have 2 problems. The point being that when you think of using regular expressions for code search, you are, in fact, going to run into lots of other problems. And that's why we've actually taken a different approach, as well as many other researchers looking into this code search. We realize that there is a need for better search support. Regular expressions are not helping developers enough. If we think back to that Coe et al. Study, I mentioned that 40 of the 48 developers started with code search. Out of all the searches that they executed throughout their task, 88% of them failed. So 12% were successful. 88% were absolutely irrelevant to what they were trying to do. So what are some of the problems that we're running into? Well, as you saw in the example, these multi-word queries, Google-style queries that we're all used to doing, and especially younger developers are very used to doing, these absolutely fail when you're trying to search code. There's differences in what can be in between these two words. These two words can be mushed together. There can be an underscore. They can be camel cased. These searches are just really hard to get right with regular expressions. Now let's say, as we saw the developer back off his query and actually formulate a pretty good query failed. Even when you're able to formulate a pretty clever query that is going to find the thing you're looking for, it's going to return an unranked list. So as we saw an example, he or she would have had to go through 134 instances of the string failed to find what he was looking for. And there was only one place that was relevant in that. And finally, we didn't see this exactly in the example, but believe me, I've watched lots of these videos. These inexact matches become a problem when you're searching using regular expressions. If you search for saving instead of save, that's a problem with regular expressions. Again, you can solve that. You can write a really clever regular expression, but as we've seen in our studies, and if you watch developers program, they'll make mistakes writing regular expressions in this search dialog over and over again. So, what have we done about it? Well, we built upon the shoulders of lots of great work in code search that's gone on in the past 5 to 10 years, and we built this code search tool called Sando. We are able to use information retrieval technology to handle multi-word queries. You can type a Google search into our tool, and it will return you results. Not only just results, but ranked results. So the best results, of course, at the top, and the worst results at the bottom. And finally, if you type in saving, saved, save, whatever, Sando can handle that. It's using stemming to understand what is the root of the word that you're actually searching for. So that's what I want to talk about next. I want to show you how to use the default version of Sando, which is an extension in Visual Studio. So I'm just going to pull that up. And for those of you not familiar with Visual Studio, it's very similar to Eclipse, of course. It has lots of great functionality at the top for you. It has, of course, your code window, and then very often your Solution Explorer, which is similar to the Package Explorer, where all of the files of your project are listed. So you can see in this example, this is a pretty large project. Each of these folders is a subproject, and there's many files in each subproject. And in fact, this is Sando's source code base itself, just to give you an idea of how much effort we put into making this tool. So what we're going to do is use Sando to search Sando. So one of the things that Sando does is it's actually parsing C#, C, and C++ code. So let's see, for instance, where it's parsing C# methods. So I've typed in search terms, a multi-word query, as we discussed before, and I've hit return, or of course you can hit search, and you can see we have lots of results returned here with an icon indicating what type of results you have. And if you are to click on any result, you can have kind of a peek into what the actual code looks like. So in this example, of course, Sando is doing exactly what we would want it to do. It's returned the parse method in the source.ml C# parser, exactly what we were looking for. It's parsing C# methods. So you can see as we go down the list in our results, you'll see less relevant things, maybe even relevant to only one of the words in our query. But because it's ranked, the best answers are always at the top. Now I want to show you another example. You might have noticed as I go through these results, I can click on the results and the code will be opened over here. So I know there must be some code that is in charge of opening the file when I click on the results. So let's say maybe there's like a file opened kind of event or something. So I'm going to search for that, and I'll click the search button so you can see. And one thing I want you to notice about the first result, which is again exactly what we would want, it's this open file method. The word ordering is flipped. Again, something else that regular expressions won't handle very well. And I've used the word open in my query, and of course open, the root of the word is only used here in this method. So all of this to say, hopefully in this very brief demo of Sando, the search tool, you've seen we can handle these multi-word queries using information retrieval technology. We can rank results, getting the best results at the top, and we can handle these inexact messages on matches, which are often a problem when you're searching source code. So, what we just talked about is Sando as just a tool, which is how many developers use it off of Visual Studio Extension Gallery. We have, on the order of 650 downloads of that tool there. So people are using this tool. But the interesting part to you guys as researchers might be Sando, the search platform. And so, as we were building Sando, we first intended it as just a search tool for developers to use. But we started making subcomponents of Sando, such as a splitter that might split identifiers into single words, using camel case or underscore or whatever strategy you might want to use, and even a C# parser that takes any given C# source code and chops it into pieces and gives it to our indexer, who might eventually put it in the index. So we noticed that we were building all these building blocks that we had seen in many other people's work as well. And we noticed as we tried to reuse other work that there just wasn't much out there. And we wanted to provide to the research community something that they could build their work upon, and they could help further code search research. And so that's exactly what we did. We have Sando. It is a code search tool, but it is also an extensible framework. You can use Sando itself to investigate your favorite subtask of code search. And what you're able to do is just implement the part that you're interested in and reuse all of our code, which has been field tested both by us. I mean, we use Sando daily when we program, and by many of the users that are out in the field using it for their regular work that report bugs back to us. So let me give you a couple for instances. If you're more of a developer type and you're really just interested in making Sando work on a new language, if you have a domain-specific language or just one that isn't implemented in Sando yet, we've created an extension point in the parser. You can essentially chop whatever language into methods, fields, classes, and things like that, and Sando will handle all the rest for you. It'll put everything in an index, it will search it, and it will show it back to the user in the UI. There's a lot of research recently on splitting words, and in fact, splitting identifiers into single words seems like a trivial problem, but when you really start looking at different languages, like especially C++ and C, you realize that there's lots and lots of different conventions to how people name variables, and this is a non-trivial problem. So researchers that are interested in investigating the subproblem, instead of having to implement this whole search framework, again, they just implement a new splitter. It's a single method, really, to them, and they can use the rest of our framework. Similarly, we allow you to change the query terms, maybe expanding query terms or changing the weights of whether a method body is weighed more heavily or a method name is weighed more heavily. And because we wanted to make this as open as possible, we even allow you to take the information retrieval results, or the results of how the query is related to the method and class documents, and then reorder them and rewrite them according to any scheme that you'd like. So there's a lot of people using program structure or dynamic program information to tweak information retrieval results, and that's what this point was created for. So I want to just show you quickly how we can use Sando to implement an idea that we have. So first, as I mentioned, right now we're coding on Sando. So this is our Visual Studio. This is the Sando code. To test this code that has already been written here, we can start a new instance of Visual Studio. So this is just like in Eclipse, starting a runtime workspace. And we'll wait till it starts up completely. And it's going to start up opened to a project called Cropper. And what this project does, let me click this button, is it allows users to take screen captures and then crop them down to whatever size they might want to actually have. So you can see that we're loading up here, and this is what Cropper looks like. It has slightly less number of projects than Sando itself does, but it's still of a substantial size, and you can see some of the source code over on the left. And now we're running Sando in the what I call the experimental workspace. And let's just verify that Sando is working. Okay, when we search for crop, we do see, of course, some results because this is about cropping, but it also maybe captures images, and we can see it finds things like process captured image. Again, kind of what we'd expect. Now, let's say I'm a developer working on this project Cropper, and I know that it's actually doing some math calculations. I know it was something similar to the word calculations, but I realize I always abbreviate that term, so I just search for calc. Okay, and you'll see there are actually no results found for this. So maybe I actually change it to search for the entire word, and I realize somebody's gone back and cleaned up my code and expanded calc to calculate. So maybe I just want to make a very simple extension to Sando to whenever I search for calc, automatically search for calculate as well. Automatically expand my query. This is something I do all the time, so I just like to have that automatically done for me. So we're going to look at implementing that extension point in Sando. Now I have already implemented this extension point, and it's implemented in this project, and I want to show you the entire code for that extension point. And this is it. We implement the iQuery rewriter, and we then implement a single method, rewrite query, and it simply replaces the string calc with calculate. If it was in fact part of the word calculate, you got to fix it, of course. And I'm not to say that this is a great implementation, but this does expand our query from calc to calculate. So we have that implemented, but it is not deployed into Sando. You need to interact with the Sando extension point framework in order to get it deployed into Sando, and I'm going to show you how to do that. All you'd have to do is take your DLL that you've created, I'm going to copy that, and you put it in the Sando plugin directory. Now I can tell you where to find this on your machine, but it's very trivial to find on your machine, and I'll paste it in there. So that's step one. The only other step I have to do to deploy an extension point to Sando is to edit this configuration file. So I'm going to take this bit of text, which is 4 lines, and it just basically says use this query expander in this DLL, and I'm going to add that to my configuration file. So I've added these 4 lines. These 4 lines. And I'm just going to go ahead and save that. All right, and so that's all I have to do to deploy this extension into Sando. I'm just going to double check and make sure that this has actually been deployed. We're going to run again our testing version of Sando. It just takes a minute to start up here. All right, and as we're waiting for it to open, what I'm going to do is I'm going to search again for calc, and we should hope that this time our query is automatically expanded to calculate, and we do find our results. So let's see if I've actually done this correctly. Oops. And you can see, even though I've just searched for calc, I do get the results for calculate. So again, not a very useful plugin. I don't recommend deploying this one into your Sando, but you can see how easy it is to write a query rewriter extension point for Sando, and you can do many different types of extension points just this easy. All right, so hopefully you've seen how easy it really is to reuse Sando's existing components. If you don't want to worry about the splitter, you use our splitter. With the idea that you can get your extension points running in a real prototype in seconds and minutes, really. And that way you can play with your ideas in a real setting on real code and really get feedback on whether that approach is actually going to work out or not. All right, so coming back to the overall talk, I've talked about Sando itself. It's a totally free, totally open source code search tool. Even if you don't like the way that the direction we're taking it, that's okay. The source code is out there. You can fork it and take it in whichever direction you'd like. There's lots of possibilities of building PCs and other papers on top of this. Sando as a search tool itself works much better than the state-of-the practice and some of the state-of-the-art because it avoids many of the pitfalls of regular expression searches. So it can handle multi-word queries. It doesn't care about reordering words, and it can handle different word forms, for instance. And finally, as researchers, Sando is a platform where you can really try out your ideas. If you have a code search idea, no longer do you have to implement the idea on, as an Eclipse program or as a Visual Studio extension. We've done that work for you. You can try out your ideas very quickly on real code or even real users. So that's it from our talk today. Thanks for listening.
Do we have to use your UI, or is there a way to output just lines, column information results?
So we don't have an extension point to not use our UI, but it would be very easy to implement. If you're interested in implementing that, I could show you how to do that. That would be doable for sure.
How does that scale to like the large code base?
It depends on how large you mean. We've tried it. I've tried it on the biggest projects I could find on CodeDucks, and it's able to hit my service.